Hey, how's it going? This is James P. White from 95.7 Cruise FM, The Locker Room. Welcome to the Jedi Jimmy podcast. This is episode number 24, Obi-Wan Kenobi, episode number 6, and its title is Part 6. Who knew? Okay, so I'm going to give you a total breakdown and then do all the other stuff. So Reva did go to Tatooine looking for Owen because she met him in the first episode to go after Luke. Because if you remember in the last episode, she saw the communication that Obi-Wan had with a buddy from Alderaan. I'm blanked on who his name is, but it doesn't matter. So she went there to go after Luke. Brew was a bit of a badass. She is so impressive. She's such a powerful character. She was ready to protect the farm. She wasn't ready to run. She grabbed the blasters and said, yeah, no, we're protecting Luke. No matter what. Now, if you remember in the last episode, they were in, Ben and the refugees were in the shuttle that left, and Darth Vader's Star Destroyer was chasing after them, blasting at them. Ben left the ship to lead Vader away to protect everybody else that was on the ship, including Leia. Leia was a little upset. She didn't want him to leave because she was afraid she wouldn't see him again. Now, Obi-Wan and Vader actually did fight in this episode, and it was epic. At first, the first part of the duel, they were pretty well matched, but Vader did use the Force to bury Obi-Wan in a bunch of rocks, and in this episode, Vader stuck to his Form 5, and Obi-Wan was using his Form 3 of lightsaber combat. Now, after the Vader was buried Obi-Wan with the rocks, Obi-Wan was actually able to use the Force to shield himself, to protect himself from the rocks, and then he got rid of them. It was like a huge explosion. It was almost like a volcano where all the rocks kind of left, and Obi-Wan went back after Vader. Now, the fight continued between Obi-Wan and Vader, but not only did Obi-Wan use his Form 3 as much as he usually does, but he actually switched a little bit back to his Form 4. If you don't know, that's the same style that Yoda was a master of, but he also learned it at the very beginning in Episode 1. So the Phantom Menace, he used that specific style to fight against Darth Maul, where he defeated Darth Maul for the first time, and it was so cool, like with all the flips and fancy moves. But he also threw in a little bit of Form 7. Now, Form 7 is a very complicated form in which actually Mace Windu developed, and that's where he was using like the strikes with the hilt that destroyed Vader's chest piece. Now, Obi-Wan was able to cut through Vader's helmet, and if you look at the damage to the helmet, it was very similar to what Ahsoka did in the Rebels series when they fought in the Jedi Temple. Now, at that point, Obi-Wan was a little conflicted, and he kept saying to Vader/Anakin, "I'm sorry. I'm the cause of all of this. I'm sorry." But Vader did say, "You did not kill Anakin Skywalker. I did, the same way as I'm going to destroy you. And Ben's response was, then my friend is truly dead. It was a revelation that actually helped Obi-Wan get in balance with the Force. But there's a little bit of a crossover with this. If you remember in Return of the Jedi, Luke said something very similar to Vader in that episode. Because when he gave himself up on Endor, he said, I know you're my father, and there is still good in you. And Vader's response was, Obi-Wan once thought as you did. And you're wrong. And Luke said, then my father is truly dead. Again, there's a bit of a crossover there. Now, with this, it actually makes a quote that Obi-Wan said in A New Hope make more sense, because he says, a young Jedi named Darth Vader, who once was my pupil, until he turned to evil, helped the Empire strike down and destroy the Jedi Knights. He betrayed and murdered your father. So Darth Vader actually betrayed and murdered his father, who was also Anakin, because he admitted to that in this episode. Quite deep. Now, there was a huge fight between Owen Lars and Brew, fighting against Reva to protect Luke from Reva, who was actually trying to kill Luke because she found out that he is Vader or Anakin's son. But as she was about to run Luke through with her lightsaber, she had a flashback of remembering how Vader killed her friends and tried to kill her. She had a flashback and realized that she was wrong. So she took Luke to his family, so Owen and Brew, and she got rid of the dark side in herself. She turned from the dark side and relinquished her dark saber. Now, Vader went back to Mustafar, repaired his suit at his castle, and then he had a conversation or a communication with Darth Sidious, and Darth Sidious said, I feel the conflict in you. You have too much of an obsession with your old master. And Vader said, no, I only am here to serve you. Again, there was a crossover in Return of the Jedi when there was a bit of a conflict in Vader when he was searching for Luke in Return of the Jedi. There's a lot of crossovers in this episode. Now, in previous episodes, I said I'm not sure if Leia actually knew that Ben was Obi-Wan Kenobi, because it kind of conflicts a little bit with her conversation or her hologram that she sent looking for Obi-Wan in R2-D2, but there's a little bit of a weird point there. Now, Obi-Wan takes Leia back to Alderaan to meet up with Bail Organa, her adopted father, and then her mother as well. But Obi-Wan and Leia did actually create a little bit of a bond. And it was actually quite cool. Now, Owen did actually have a change of heart when Ben went to say goodbye to Owen and say, "You raise him, I will not interfere. I'm going to go away." So where the change of heart was, Ben was actually able to meet Luke and gave him the toy fighter that he had, the T-16. And another prediction of mine showed up a little bit later, which was the ghost of Qui-Gon Jinn did end up showing up because Obi-Wan did have balance with the Force. Now, Ben did actually move out of his current cave and went further into the Dune Sea to find his new cave. That is where he met the ghost of Qui-Gon Jinn, which I predicted, and it was so cool. And that was basically the end of the episode, and there was no after credit scene. Now, predictions that I do have going forward, I do not believe there will be another season of Obi-Wan Kenobi, because all the storylines are pretty much concluded leading up to A New Hope. And there is room now for a Reva spinoff, but her as a light sider. So turning back to a Jedi and maybe making a bit of a comeback, kind of like in the Hercules series where Xena actually became a hero. There could be a bit of a similar kind of story going forward. Or Reva might actually make an appearance in the Ahsoka Tano series, which will take place a few years in the future. Now, I always explain previous mistakes I've made. So predictions that did not happen. Quinlan Vos did not show up at all in this series. I'm kind of disappointed. Reva did not die, but she turned to the light side. And I was wrong that Obi-Wan and Vader did not meet on Tatooine. It was another planet, which I still don't know the name of. And predictions I got right. Reva did go to Tatooine after Luke. Obi-Wan and Vader did fight again, and the Force Ghost of Qui-Gon Jinn did show up at the end because Obi-Wan was more attuned with the Force. Now, my favorite quotes throughout the entire series. First of all, Episode 1. Jedi cannot help what they are. Their compassion leaves a trail. The Jedi Code is like an itch. He can't help it. That was a quote from the Grand Inquisitor. Episode 2. You think the less you say, the less you give away. But really, the opposite is true. That was Leia talking to Obi-Wan. In Episode 3, Quinlan Vos, a former Jedi, wrote on the wall, "Only when your eyes are closed can you truly see." Now, in episode 4, I couldn't actually find a quote, but I grabbed another one from episode 2. Obi-Wan is explaining the Force to Leia. Have you ever been afraid of the dark? How does it feel when you turn on the light? That's how the Force feels. That's pretty deep. Now, in episode 5, the light will fade, but is never forgotten. That is a quote from Obi-Wan. But there also was another quote that I really liked. Obi-Wan says to Anakin in a flashback, "Your need for victory blinds you, Anakin." That was a quote from Obi-Wan. And finally in this episode, episode 6, from Anakin, "You didn't kill Anakin Skywalker. I did, the same as I will destroy you. So that was actually Vader saying that to Obi-Wan. Now, the lightsaber forms used in this episode, of course, Vader and used Form 5. And at the beginning, Obi-Wan used a lot of Form 3. But then after he was buried by the rocks that Vader did, when he went back to fight with Obi-Wan went back to fight Vader, he used some Form 7 techniques as well as Form 5. Form 4 was actually the style that Obi-Wan used in A Phantom Menace that he used to defeat Vader. Darth Maul, and that is the same style that Yoda uses. I will actually demonstrate techniques from Form 4 as well as Form 7 right now. Now, in closing, I need to thank all of you for joining me for this episode of this podcast. I love this series. It's so awesome. Holy cow. Like, this is like second level. Like, so amazing. And I do... next week, I will actually be giving you a breakdown of the entire series, of mistakes I've made, predictions I've made, whether or not they've made it through, the whole 9 yards. Now, I do need to thank all my sponsors. First of all, I need to thank the Dean Blundell Network on deanblundell.com, where you can find this podcast and many others, as well as I do need to thank my buddy Army Chris, Fire for Effect Productions, who I like to call Fire at Will Productions, for helping me get this podcast all set up. And I do also have another sponsor. It is the Locker Room merch, where you can find this shirt that I'm wearing, the Obi-Wan, the Mexican Jedi shirt, as well as many other of our products. I look forward to seeing you next week. What can go wrong? Holy... yeah.